Right, so good evening everybody, всем доброго вечера. So welcome to our charity stream, which we're having today, this lesson to raise money for Охматditу. We all know about the awful strike that happened, but hopefully today what we can do is we can learn some English. We can also try and raise some money as well for the charity too. Obviously it's very important at the moment to help as much as we can. So as we go through this process, hopefully we're going to have the opportunity to learn something new, but also as well to raise some money for a very important cause. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be looking at two different topics. We're going to do some work, first of all, with articles, because, of course, for Ukrainian people, articles are one of the most difficult areas of language. Of course, in your language, you do not have articles in the same way as you have English. Hi, Igor. Thank you very much for joining us. Hello, Alla. Hello, Duga. Ja nie znam, jak się prawильно сказати, ale вітаю вас усім. So today we're going to be looking at articles first of all. So the way this will work is I'm going to explain some theory so that we all have an understanding of the basic ideas of articles, when we use them, how we use them, the basic structures. Then I will give you some tasks to do, which we will we'll check, we'll discuss. If there's anything to talk about, we can have a look at them again. And then after articles, we're going to do some work with conditionals. On Twitter, quite a few people wanted to study conditionals. So after articles, we are going to study everything. So zero, first, second, third, and mixed conditionals. We're going to study all of the types, how they work. Again, you will also have the opportunity to do a few exercises as well. And so, I hope it's going to be useful and everything else. Трошки українською мовою, то я хотів сказати, що я дуже вдячний, що ви всі тут з мною. Я сподіваюся, що це буде для вас дуже корисно. Я розумію, що англійська мова це не дуже легка для всіх, не тільки для українців. Але я дуже сподіваюся, що сьогодні я можу щось пояснити. І це буде корисно, і це буде весело також, я дуже сподіваюся. So let's start. До речі, якщо у вас є запитання, ви можете завжди написати в чаті, і я відповім, якщо вам щось не зрозуміло, але якщо ви хочете уточнити щось, будь ласка, просто напишіть, і я відповім, і можу пояснити. So let's make a start. So I've made a little PowerPoint that we're going to be using today. And as I mentioned before, we are going to start with looking at articles. And firstly, I'm going to explain some of the main differences about when we use different articles. And then you will have the opportunity to do some tasks, do some practice, and we'll see how we go with everything. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the idea of definite and indefinite ideas. So we use the word, first of all, indefinite, to show that we are not talking about something specific. It means it doesn't matter which one we are talking about. It's not important which one. And for this purpose, for this idea, we usually use a or an. So if we look at our first point that we have here, there is a library in my village. Library is an example of a singular noun. Singular це воднiny, це іменник воднiny. And usually a and an is only used with singular nouns. we do not normally use at and an with plural or with uncountable nouns. Like always in English, there is always some exception, some wyniatok, but usually a and an is used with singular. And as I mentioned previously, we normally use at and an when it doesn't matter which one we are talking about, it's not important, or we are giving some new information to the person we are talking to. So for example, we have here, I saw a black cat yesterday. This is new information to you. You don't know anything about the black cat, and so we use the article a or an in this situation. One thing that I want to highlight here, is that very often people learn that the first time you talk about something, you use a or an. And that's kind of true, but not really. What is important is that I think it is new information to you. Because if it is not new information to you, and it's the first time I talk about it, then I use the in this situation. So for example, if I said, let's say we are in a real classroom, I could say to you, for example, please close the door. This is the first time I've talked about the door, but I think you know which door I'm talking about. And so in this situation, we use the article the. So this idea about the first time, second time, it's kind of true, but not exactly. It's much, much better to think about if it is new information or if it is something that I think you already know about. That's the most important thing for you to think about when we're doing this. Now, if we move on to the article the, we can use the for any common noun. So this means that it doesn't matter if it's singular, plural, countable, uncountable. We can use the with any common noun. It's not grammatically restricted. As I mentioned before, a and an is usually for singular nouns, but the we can use with any common noun. It doesn't matter what type of noun it is. So for example, we've got the sentence, let's go to the park. Now, we use the if we are referring to something specific, something unique, or the information is already known to the person who you are talking to. It's the same idea with please close the door, or as Tom's example, we're collecting money for the hospital. You know which one we are talking about. You know which door in this situation. We know which hospital we are talking about, and so we use the article the. We normally also use the article the if something is unique, so if there is only one of something. So for example, what is the capital of your country? Countries only have one capital, so we use the article the. And as we've mentioned, if it's already known, then we use the article the as well. So for example, the boy I met is called Sasha. So here, I think you know which boy I'm talking about, and so we use the article the to refer to the boy in this situation. So does anybody have any questions here before we move on to some more theory? Let's give people a few seconds to think. Oh, just have some water. Very hot today. Too hot. Okay, doesn't look like there's any questions in the chat, so I think we can move forward. So we're now going to look then at articles in terms of general meaning. So when we want to talk about something in general, when it is non-specific, we use no article, or the zero article, as it's sometimes called. So I've got a question. What are the exceptions with at and an? Well, there are a lot of exceptions with at and an. If we talk about with, for example, uncountable nouns, if we take that as an example, usually we do not use any article with uncountable nouns. So, for example, you could say, I don't know, I have information about the project, for example, something like that. So information is uncountable, so we do not use an article before it, usually. But if we are talking about an uncountable noun and we put an adjective, prikmetnik, before it, then in some situations, and ones that you have to remember, unfortunately, in some situations we use an article a. So, for example, you could say, I have knowledge of English, but we say, I have a good knowledge of English. Because we have the adjective good, we now need to use the article a before it. But this is only with some adjectives, and unfortunately, only with some nouns, I should say. And unfortunately, yeah, most of them you just have to remember. Articles are, in my opinion, probably the most difficult area of grammar in the English language. I don't think there's anything more difficult than this. And a lot of the time you do, unfortunately, just have to remember in which situations which you use them and which we don't. Because like the ones that we're looking at here, of course, we're talking about the general rules, but you can always go deeper and deeper and deeper, and you will always find something else to look at. So. But I think with articles, like a lot of the time, as long as you have a fundamental idea, like a basic idea of how articles work, then 95% of the time you will get the correct choice. You just need to think about, is it new information? Is it not new? Is it general? Is it specific? And I know it's a lot to think about. I do understand there's a lot of information that you need to remember. But if we get kind of like these fundamental ideas, then usually it will be okay. It will go pretty well usually. So let's go back to our general meanings. So yeah, we use the zero article or no article plus a plural noun or an uncountable noun to talk about something in general. So for example, we've got I like cats better than dogs. So here it's in the plural, so umnožení. And so we use no article because I'm talking about all cats, all dogs. It's not specific here. The same with the second sentence. Life in this situation is uncountable. And so we say modern life is stressful because we are referring to life in general, non-specific idea in this case. When we want to refer to things in general, we can also use a or an plus a singular noun, and this will mean all examples of whatever we're talking about. So, for example, if we say a doctor earns more than a teacher, what we mean in this sentence is all doctors or all teachers. We're referring to this idea in general with this point. Now, in some situations, we can also use the with a singular noun, so again, vodiny, when we talk in general. And this is specifically with species, so types of animal, inventions, and also musical instruments. So, for example, we've got here, who invented the computer? Here, what I'm doing is I'm talking about all computers in general. So, of course, I can say who invented computers. That would also be correct. But it's possible to say who invented the computer as well. And one more example we have here, the whale is a mammal. Again, I'm not talking about one specific whale. I'm talking about whales in general. And so for that reason, again, we can also use the plus a singular noun because we're talking about a specific species. Now, last point here for general meaning before we move forward is about the with adjectives. So with some nationality adjectives and with some adjectives just in general, it is possible to use the plus an adjective without a noun. And this will refer to the plural noun in general with this meaning. So for example, we have here, the Japanese make good cars. What we mean with this sentence is Japanese people make good cars. But if we use this the plus adjective, then it can have this adjective plus people idea. The same with the second sentence as well. The wealthy should help the poor. So here we are giving the idea of wealthy people should help poor people. And this idea is actually quite an advanced idea. It makes your English sound very sophisticated because here we are using the article the, but there is no noun in the sentence. And so building your sentences in this way, it sounds quite nice. It sounds quite good. So if you can build them in this way, it's actually quite nice. It's quite it sounds very high register, I guess, if we build them like this. Okay, so does anybody have any questions here? There's always just a few seconds to think for people. Just move the slideshow forward just while we're waiting. Okay, doesn't look like it, so let's look at for articles, and then I'm going to give you a couple of tasks to do to see what we've remembered and what we've learned from this. So there are a couple of other uses of articles that we need to understand. Все дуже зрозуміло. Дуже радий чути, що все зрозуміло. So there are a few other examples of when we need to use articles in English. So first of all, if we have got a superlative adjective, we need to use the article the. A superlative adjective is when we say it is like the number one idea. In Ukrainian, it's usually with the nai prefix, so like najshvidше, najkraще, najlipše, najhirše. These are superlative adjectives. So for example, we've got this is the best car. So when we have these superlative adjectives, we always use the. When we talk about the frequency or quantity of something, we normally use a or an. So we've got two examples here. I play football twice a week. And another example, strawberries cost £3 a kilo. Now, a lot of people in this situation would use the word per. So like, I play football twice per week, strawberries cost £3 per kilo. Now, per is not wrong, it's not a mistake, it's completely okay, but it's quite formal. And so in normal, everyday English conversation, we usually prefer to use a or an instead of per. So if you want to use per, like I said, it's not wrong, it's not a mistake. If you want to continue using it, then please continue, it's not a problem. But usually native speakers would use the article a or an in this situation. It's a little bit more natural, and that's probably what I would recommend that you use here as well. Now we move on to the geographical ideas, which will take up quite a bit of this slide and also the next point. So, with most geographical points, we use the article the. So we've got the examples here of oceans, seas, deserts, mountain ranges, so groups of mountains, groups of islands, and some regions. With regions, a lot of them you just have to remember, unfortunately. So examples, ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, sea, the Black Sea, desert, the Sahara Desert, mountains, the Alps, group of mountains, group of islands, the Canary Islands, and an example of a region, the Middle East, would be an example where we use the article there. Then we come on to countries. Now, most countries in English do not use an article, as again, I'll highlight this on the next slide as well, but usually countries do not use an article. But there are two specific situations where we need to use the article the with the names of countries in English. And we have got the situation where the name of the country is plural, so umnožení, so for example, the Netherlands, the United States of America, the Philippines, the Seychelles, the Maldives. These are all in the plural, and so we use the article the. And then the second rule when we need to use the article the with names of countries is when the name of the country is descriptive. Now, what this means is it describes the type of country. So we've got the example here of the Republic of Ireland. We use the word republic. It describes the type of country. So we say the Republic of Ireland. And we also have here the United Kingdom. Kingdom describes, again, the type of country. It's a political system of the country. So we use the article the as well. Okay, so we've got a question here. Why do some British teachers say the Ukraine? So, in short, when Ukraine was occupied during the was occupied by the Soviet Union until 1991, Ukraine was not recognized as an independent country. It was understood as a region, as an area of the USSR in general. And during that time, because Ukraine was not recognized as an independent country, it was referred to as the Ukraine as a region. It was one of those things where we use the to refer to a region. Now, obviously, Ukraine is an independent country. There is no reason nowadays to use the article the, but because I think of habit more than anything, some people, wrongly of course, Ukraine should have no article before it, but because of Ukraine being referred to as the Ukraine for many, many, many years until its independence from the Soviet Union, many people during that time referred to it as the Ukraine, and for some reason people find it difficult to forget about it. Let's say it like that. And for some people it's very hard. I mean, like, I'm not trying to justify it, but when countries and cities as well, when they change their names, it's very hard sometimes for people to remember the correct name just because it's normal for them to use. I mean, you know, I remember when I first came to Odessa, no, це вже що 10-11 років тому, and when I was getting taxis, some taxi drivers would still say, no, як 80 рублей, а не гривен. And I think for some people, I don't know, they just either can't remember or it's just easier for them to say it like that. I don't know. And it's the same as well with the names of cities in Ukraine. It's the same with Kyiv, Odessa, Kharkiv, Lviv. For a long time in English, it was usual to say Kiev, Odessa with two S's, Lvov, Kharkov. And you know, people are changing, but it just takes time, unfortunately. It will change. It is getting better, but with time, it will become as it should be in the Ukrainian way, and not in the occupiers' way. So So back to countries. So they're kind of the two basic ideas for plurals and for descriptive names. But there are two big exceptions for everyday language. Now, there is some debate about whether these are correct or not, but I decided to include these because this is what most people refer to them as. So the two main exceptions are the Gambia, small country in West Africa, which is named after a river, so it keeps the article the, and also the Vatican as well. If we say Vatican City, then there is no article, but if we refer to it in short with the Vatican, then we do use the article the in this situation. So let's now go forward to the second set of other uses of articles. This is the last page of theory. Then I'll see if there's any questions, and then we're going to do some practice with these structures. So first of all, with names of hotels, cinemas, theatres, museums, newspapers, we normally use the article the with these. So the Hilton, the Multiplex, the Globe Theatre, the Natural History Museum, the Times. We normally use the article the with these places. Then back to a few other things with no article. So I've got a question here. Is there an exception for technical documentation? Our engineers translated manual into English and there was no article in terms of tools and parts. Perhaps it should be so. Well, technical English is not the same as general English, first of all. It's very important to understand that there are many, many different types of English that are used, and the language that is used for normal everyday communication is not the same as technical English or legal English or any of the what we call Englishes for specific purposes, anything like this. The rules can be different depending on how it's used. So, to be honest with you, I would need to see what they had written, what tools it were, or whatever, because if the names are in the plural, for example, then it would usually be no article. But kind of to give like a more exact answer, I would need to know exactly what it was, what they'd written, and that would be more useful. So, but it's not necessarily a mistake, because again, the rules for everyday spoken language are different to the specific types of other forms of English that we have. So it's not necessarily a mistake, but yeah, again, I would need to see slightly more detail to know what's going on, to be honest with you. So moving forward then, so on to no article now. So here we've got a long list of things where we don't use articles. So here we have names of continents, most countries, states, cities, mountains, lakes, streets, parks, shops, restaurants, and magazines. So for example, continent Europe, country Ukraine, state Florida, city Kyiv. Now mountains, an important point here. You'll remember on the previous slide that I said mountain ranges, we use an article. So we say the Alps, the Himalayas, the Carpathians, the Andes. But if it's an individual mountain, we do not use an article in this situation. So like Hovela as an example, or Mont Blanc, Everest, Kilimanjaro, K2. We do not use any article with individual mountains. Same with lakes, like Svitis, for example, in Volyn. Streets, Deribasovska Street, for example, we do not use an article here. Parks, Mariinsky Park, another example. Shops, Silpo, just as an example here. Restaurants, Bernadazzi, which is my favourite restaurant in Odessa. I think it's closed at the moment, unfortunately, but when it reopens, I can definitely recommend it. I love that place. And magazines, Forbes, just as a simple example. Then some more examples here with no article. So if we talk about the names of meals, games, sports, school subjects, languages, and some illnesses and institutions, we do not use an article unless you are referring to a specific one. And this is a really, really precise rule. This is really hard sometimes to get this right. So, for example, breakfast is a meal. And so we do not normally use an article. So if you say, for example, I have breakfast at 8 o'clock every morning, there is no article here because you are not referring to anything specific. But as soon as you make it about a specific one, then we should say, I had a, for example, big breakfast this morning. Now it's something specific. And so because of that, we should use the article a, because now it's a specific point. So I've got a question here. Daniel, підкажи, будь ласка, як конкретно вимовляти Ukraine? Я чула, що багато іноземців ставлять наголос на U, чи це теж британська англійська? Ну, наскільки мені відомо, я думаю, що в американській англійській у них наголос буде на першому складі. Я думаю, що в американській англійській це більш Ukraine. Але у британській англійській це точно Ukraine, це точно безперечно на другому складі. Але, чесно кажучи, в американській англійській я не впевнений, я не можу сказати на 100%, але мені здається, що в американській англійській можна сказати і Ukraine, і Ukraine. Я вважаю за краще вимовляти що я хочу сказати. Я думаю, що це краще ставити наголос на другому складі, але я думаю, що в американській англійській можна на першому. Я думаю, що це теж правильно, мені здається. То ось так. Але я 100% я можу сказати, що в британській англійській це Ukraine на другому складі. безперечно. Okay, so moving forward, sports, games first of all, for example, chess. In English, chess is a game, not a sport. Tennis as a sport, subjects, maths, languages, Italian, illnesses such as sunburn, cancer are usually used without articles. And also institutions, so school, university, prison, these are examples of institutions. But again, this is something where people have a lot of problems. So for example, if you say, I go to school every day, I went to university in Dnipro. Here we are talking about the idea, the concept of this thing. So we do not use an article in this situation. So I go to school every day. I went to university in Dnipro. But when we talk about a physical building, now we use the article the. So now, or we can also use the article a here. So for example, the school where I studied is in Ismail. Now you are talking about a physical, specific place, the actual place. And so now we need to add the article the. It's a very small difference, but it's quite noticeable, like when people say, I go to the school every day, for example. It sounds a bit strange because here you're talking about the idea or the concept. So in this case, we should not use an article. Okay, so I see Alona's added an example of technical documentation. So install drilling jig on the locking pin of extension lock. Yeah, so for manuals, that sounds fine. That sounds okay to me. But it's interesting that they've used the locking pin. They've added an article here before locking pin and not for the others. But yeah, that sounds fine. That sounds okay to me for technical English. If it's for a manual, that sounds okay. That's not a problem as far as I'm concerned. So yeah. Okay, so do we have any questions about any of the theory here? Ness, what's the modern trend for articles? Are they going away or changing in some specific way? Well, they're not going away. They are not disappearing, unfortunately. We will continue to have articles in the future. But there is kind of like a trend with the younger generation, with the mullod, that they tend to use English not according to the traditional rules of the language. And so what that means is that articles for them are not as important. And the same with like using the correct verb forms and things like that. But like sort of it's very slangy and it doesn't sound particularly, I don't want to say educated because that's not the right word because it is a legitimate form of the language. But according to the traditional rules of the language, it's not completely correct, and to most native speakers, it would sound very unusual. So yeah, articles aren't disappearing. They're not disappearing. So yeah, we do have to know them, unfortunately, and they will be continued to be used. They're not gonna disappear. Okay, one more question here. Питання не по темі. Підкажіть, будь ласка, яку мову, як другу переважно вивчав в Британії. Так, ну коли я був в школі, я вивчав, французьку і німецьку мову. І я думаю, що як зазвичай, це французька, іспанська і німецька. Вони більш поширені, кажемо так, в школах в Британії. Але є інші мови також. В Уелсі можна вивчати валійську мову, звичайно. Є також китайську мову. Можна вивчити арабську, іноді російську навіть, польську мову також. Але найчастіше, я сказав би, це французька, іспанська і німецька, мені здається. Але може тут варто підкреслити, що в школах, якщо дитина не хоче вивчати іноземну мову, то не треба. Це не обов'язково. І я думаю, що це неправильно. Як в Україні треба вивчати хоч одну іноземну мову, але у нас не треба. Бо я думаю, що є така думка, що ми розмовляємо англійською, і усі у світі розмовляють англійською також, тому чого нам треба вивчати іншу мову? І це неправильно. Ну так, але як зазвичай я сказав, французька, іспанська і німецька, але це не дуже популярний вибір. Вивчити мову, іноземну мову мається на увазі в школі. Взагалі. So yeah. Okay, so let's do some practice now with articles, and I'm going to give you a couple of small tasks for us to have a look at. So, here is our first task. We've got here 8 sentences. I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and I would like you to try and complete the spaces with a, an, or the in each space. There is no article in this set. It's either a, an, or the. I will give you 5 minutes. You can make your notes on your phone, on a piece of paper. Then I will explain the answers. And then if you have any questions, anything different, then I will be happy to explain. So you have 5 minutes to do the tasks. I'll be back in just a moment. So 5 minutes to have a look. Two more minutes, everybody. 2 minutes. One more minute. Okay, so that's 5 minutes. So let me explain all of the answers. I'll explain them one by one. And then at the end, if you have any questions, anything different, we can discuss them, we can ask them at the end. So the first one we should have here, I got my sister a CD and a new book for her birthday. I don't think she liked the CD though. The first part is new information. We don't know about this. We don't know about the CD. We don't know about the book. It's new information, so we use a. But then in the second sentence, we know which CD we're talking about, so we use the article the. Number 2, is this the first time you've stayed at the Hilton? So here we have the and the. For the first one here, we're talking about a specific time, so we use the article the. And as we said before, for the names of hotels, we normally use the article the, so the Hilton. Number 3, she started her career as a teacher, but now she's a journalist. So here we are talking about somebody's profession, and usually with professions, with jobs, careers, we normally use the article a or an in this situation. So a teacher, a journalist, we normally use the article a or an with jobs. Number 4, is the Nile or the Amazon the longest river in the world? So you should have the in number 4. With the names of rivers, we normally use the article the, like with oceans, seas, we use the article the. Longest is a superlative adjective, so we use the article the here too. And the world, I think you know which world I'm talking about, so we use the article the here as well. Number 5, I took a bus and then a train to the airport. The bus was on time, but the train was late. So in the first sentence we say a bus, a train, because this is new information. I don't know about this at this moment. And then in the second one we use the because now we know which bus and which train you are talking about. So now we change to the bus and the train here. Number 6, several million visitors a year are attracted to the ski slopes on the Alps. So first of all, we have a year. As we said before, for frequency, we use the article a. Then we have the ski slopes because it's specific ski slopes, not in general. We're talking about specific ones. And it's specifically the ones on the Alps. As we said before, for mountain ranges, we use the article the in this case. Number 7, I'll meet you outside the post office. I'll be there in a quarter of an hour. So the post office, I think you know which post office I'm talking about. That's why I think we should meet there. And the second and third one, these are ones that you kind of have to remember, but with time expressions, we normally use a and an. So you could say in a quarter of an hour, I don't know, in half an hour. So we normally use the article a before these, in a third of an hour if you wanted to say 20 minutes in some strange way. But with fractions, we normally use a. And finally, number 8, we lived in the Netherlands before moving here, but before that we worked in the Middle East. So the Netherlands is a plural country, so we use the article the. And then in the Middle East, it's a region, and for this region, we use the article the. Okay, so do we have any questions about any of these 8? Just give people a few seconds to think, as always. Okay, doesn't look like it. Okay. So we're going to do now, could you explain, please, the meaning of word though in the first sentence? I see. So the word though is normally translated into Ukrainian as хоча, but though in English you can put at the beginning of the sentence or the end of the sentence. So we can say, though I don't think she liked the CD. You need to use a comma though there in that case actually for this one, but it's very typical to put it at the end of a sentence to show a contrast. But it just means the same as хоча is the meaning. It's the same as though, although is the same as well. But we can put it at the end of a sentence to show a contrast. So I bought it for her. I don't think she likes it though. And it shows a contrast between two sentences and two ideas, 2 points. Okay. So we're going to do one more practice task, and we are going to do, what shall I give you? I'll give you the short one. I'll give you one more to do, and then we're going to move forward to conditionals we're going to look at after this. So here, just 5, actually, you know what? I'll give you the longer one. We're not time limited. Let me give you the longer one. We'll do this one instead. If you want to go back and do the other one later, you can watch all of this will be on YouTube on the recording, so you can watch it later. Let's try this one. Let's try this 1B. So I'm going to give you here about 3 or 4 minutes for this. We've got a short text called Urban Life Past and Present, and here you need to complete the spaces with the or nothing. So there is no a or an here. You only have 2 choices, just the or no article. So I will give you 4 minutes to do this one, and then we will discuss when we've had a look at this. So 4 minutes to do this task. By the way, if you do have any off-topic questions, you can put them into the chat. I'll be happy to answer them while you're doing this task. Hello, Ian. Nice to see you. Yes, but 2 more minutes, everybody. Чи бачиш себе різницю між англійською менталітетом? Ну так, звичайно, я бачив, бо це інші люди. Але це дуже, я не знаю, це дуже складно пояснити. My Ukrainian teacher will kill me if she hasn't got the naholos there. Yeah, there is a difference in mentality, but it's very difficult to explain it. I think because I think because to a certain extent, like Ukrainian and British history are very, very different from each other. Like, Ukraine has had a lot of difficulties and suffering and everything else in its past. And I think that might be the reason why there is such a difference in mentality, but it's very difficult to explain. But one thing I will say, one very positive thing, is to me Ukrainians are so warm and friendly and just like I've always felt so welcomed by Ukrainian people when I've been here, and it's just fantastic, really. It's really marvelous the way that people are to me and treat me here, so it's always nice. I am Myanmar. Do you know this country? Yes, of course I know. I've never visited Myanmar, but I know people who work there, so yes, I'm aware of this country, but I've never visited, I have to say. Put my laptop in, let that to die. How can it be that the antonym for left is left? Prosto tak. It's angielska mowa. Doesn't make any sense. The English language is not logical. It doesn't make sense. Like, for example, we can say slow down, and we can also say slow up, and they mean exactly the same thing. There is no difference between them. It's angielska. Zробіть. Just how it is. Kluczowe pytanie. Dlaczego wam okremek chrani dla холодної та гарячої води? Jak ludzie w Brytanii ciut z rozumu nie zjechał. Okay, so there is a difference, and it's historically there was a reason. So historically the reason was that hot water and cold water had different pressures. Pressures at disk, if we don't know this word. And it was impossible to mix them together with the technology at that time. And so we had separate taps for hot water and cold water. Now, of course, we can mix them together, and it's no problem to put them as they are. But it's one of those things where, because of historical reasons, it's just how we prefer it. And so some people still like to have separate taps for hot water and cold water. For me, I don't understand it. We can mix them together, they should be mixed. But for some people, just because of history, they prefer to have separate hot water and cold water. In my parents' house, for example, they also have hot water and cold water. Or they did, maybe they don't anymore, but certainly they used to. So yeah. Where are you from? I'm from England, I think that's kind of obvious. Is it coming home? Yes, it is, absolutely. Tomorrow we will defeat the Spanish with no problems at all. When I started in Ukraine, how many take to learn it? So, може українською, можу сказати. То, коли я переїхав до України 11 років тому, я переїхав до Одеси. І коли я жив в Одесі, я вивчав російську мову. 1 рік більш-менш, тільки дуже прості речення і все таке. Просто щоб жити. Бо коли я жив в Одесі, мені сказали, що Одеса – це російськомовне місто, кажемо так. Вони мені так сказали, тому я вважав, що мені треба було вивчати російську. Бо я взагалі дуже рідко чув українську мову туди. Але коли я переїхав до Києва 8 років тому, це було трохи складно, мені було трохи соромно, чесно кажучи, бо там люди іноді розмовляли з мною українською, і я майже нічого не розумів. Це просто, це капець, коротше, так було. І тому я вирішив, що мені варто вивчати, це важливо вивчати українську мову. Це вже 8 років тому. Тому так, вже 8 років я вивчаю українську мову. І я досі вивчаю, звичайно, я знаю, що моє знання української це досі не відмінна, це не бездоганна. Але я намагаюся. Я думаю, що у нас мається на увазі іноземці, у нас є якась відповідальність знати державну мову країни, де ми живемо. Це не важливо, чи це Україна, Франція, Англія. Це дуже важливо знати державну мову країни. І тому я вирішив вивчати українську, і так, досить вивчаю. Я намагаюся розмовляти українською. Я розмовляю українською щодня. Зараз я живу в Україні, я живу в Луцьку. І так, це ось так я вивчаю. Так. Alright, so let's get to articles and see what we have. We can do some more off-topic questions later when we look at conditionals, but let's have a look at some articles. So, this is what we should have. So, young people tend to think that life, no article because it's life in general, was more difficult for people in the past. Again, no article here at all. Of course, the lives our parents led. Now we should use the article the because we're talking specifically about our parents' lives. Now it's specific, so we use the article the. Same with number 4. We're different from the lives we lead today. Again, we should use the article the because now it's specifically our lives. We're talking specifically in this situation. Then 5, they couldn't rely as much on modern technology as we do. Again, we're just talking modern technology in general here. There is nothing specific. 6, when my parents were young, computers, no article, because we're talking computers in general here. And 7, the mobile phone. This is the example we had before of the with something singular in general, like the whale is a mammal was the example we had before. Now we're using the plus singular to talk about mobile phones in general. So the mobile phone is correct here. Number 8, this is partly because family was very important. Here we're talking about family as an abstract idea, as a concept, so we don't use an article. 9, families. Now we're talking about families again in general. It's non-specific, so no article in 9. Number 10, the old and weak. Old and weak are adjectives, and we're using the plus adjective to refer in general, so we should use the here. 11, homelessness. No article here at all, because we're talking about homelessness as an abstract concept. Number 12 wasn't the problem that it is today. Now we're talking about specific problem, so now we use the article the. And 13, in many ways, life was better in the past. We're talking about life in general, non-specific, so we should use no article here at all. So, I'll give you a moment if you have any questions. You can write them in the chat because I have something to answer here as well. Що було найскладнішим у вивченні української мови? Українська мова взагалі це дуже складна мова для мене. Але я сказав би, що може найскладніше це відмінювання числівників. Я не можу, це просто капець. Я не пам'ятаю, як це має бути. Але я теж розумію, що для українців це дуже складна тема. Тому, якщо я знаю, що я роблю багато помилок, тому це не так погано, але це дуже складно. І також, іноді є декілька слів, іноді я неправильно пам'ятаю, то, наприклад, коли це правильно, якщо у нас є слово, наприклад, листопад, коли це правильно сказати листопада, і коли це правильно сказати листопаду. Бо, звичайно, ви знаєте, в іноземній мові є велика різниця. Але для мене це іноді дуже складно запам'ятати, коли правильно виживати. Так, ще, яку мову хотіли би вивчити для душі, не для користі чи необхідності? Може японську. Я трохи вивчав японську раніше. В університеті 2 роки я вивчав японську. я не шарив взагалі, це дуже складна мова, але це було дійсно дуже цікава мова. Як це працює, граматична структура, це дійсно цікава мова. І, звичайно, мені не треба розмовляти японською, але я думаю, що японська культура, їхня мова, це дуже цікаво для мене. І також, може, грецьку мову, я теж було би цікаво. Бо я люблю Грецію, я там був багато разів, я дуже люблю цю країну, то може це теж буде цікаво. Я думаю, що японську це буде найцікавіше, кажемо так. Okay, so let's now move forward, and we will now move forward to our conditional sentences we're going to look at now. And for conditionals, what I've done here is conditionals is a very difficult topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to study the conditionals individually, and after each part of theory, we will have a task to do. So first we'll have zero and first conditional, then a task, then we'll study second conditional, then a task, and then third conditional, и так далее. So that's the way that we're gonna do this. So we'll start first of all with the theory of zero and first conditionals. So we'll start first of all with the zero conditional. This is the simplest and the easiest. It works the same as in Ukrainian, almost exactly. So we use the zero conditional to talk about things that are always or generally true. And we build this structure usually with if or when plus present simple and then present simple. So, for example, we have if or when I feel tired, I go to bed. So something that's always or generally true, present simple, present simple. In the zero conditional, if and when are synonyms. They are the same. There is no difference in meaning. You can always use if or when in the zero conditional. They're always exactly the same. There's no difference between them. Then we go to the first conditional. We use the first conditional to talk about a likely result in the future as a result of an action or situation. And usually, we build this with if with present simple and then will plus infinitive. So for example, if she does well in her exams, she'll go to university. Now, two things I want to talk about here before I continue. First of all is look at the first part. If she does well. It is almost always a mistake to say if she will do well. That is usually not correct in English. Using if and will together is almost always a mistake. Of course, in Ukrainian, if you use a future form with if, it's okay, because you can say, якщо я буду, whatever, it's fine. But in English, this is not usually correct. And so normally we use if plus present simple in the first part, and we do not use if and will together. Also notice as well in the second part that I've written will plus infinitive. There is a very typical misunderstanding that will is the future simple, and that is not true. Will is not the future simple. In English, there is no future tense in our language. We can use will to talk about the future, of course, but we can use will to talk about the present, and we can use will to talk about the past. Will is not the future simple. And like at lower levels, it doesn't really matter. If you think will is the future simple, when you get upper intermediate and you start to learn the situations where we can use will to talk about the present and the past, it just creates a lot of problems, because then you have to forget something that you thought was true and actually it's not true. So if you learn that will is the future simple, which I think is very typical in schools, you can forget it. It's just not true. Will is a modal verb, and by definition, modal verbs do not have tense. So So that's why I've written will plus infinitive and not future simple. Now, moving forward, after if, we can actually use any present form after if. We can use present continuous, we can use present perfect simple, we can use present perfect continuous, can, should, any word, verb form that refers to the present. So, for example, we can say, if he is waiting for you, to same zaraz, he will be angry. Or, if she has seen the news, or she will be worried. So we can use any present verb form in the first conditional. Now, as I said, present simple is the most typical, it's the most usual, but we can use any present verb form. The same with the main part of the sentence. We can use any future form. We can use will, we can use be going to, we can use present continuous, we can use future continuous, we can use any future form. But again, will plus infinitive is the most typical, it's the most usual one that you will need. So just to give you an example of a different one, if she passes her exams, we are going to buy her a car. This is our intention, it's our namir. And in English, if we talk about an intention, we use be going to. We don't use will for this future. Will would be a mistake here because it's your intention. So that's zero and first conditional. Does anybody have any questions before I give you a practice task? Just give people a few seconds. It seems to take a few seconds for the questions to come through when people have them. No, looks like we're okay. All right. So, in that case then, let's now have a look at a task that I'm going to give you here. So this is the task. We've got here 6 sentences. Again, I'm going to give you probably 4 minutes for this, I think should be enough. So here you need to complete the sentences with the correct form of the verbs in brackets. These are all examples of either zero or first conditional. So, a few minutes to have a look, and then we will discuss as always when you're ready in a couple of minutes. I would be very careful about the idea of zbierajmy się being going to, because sometimes it is, but not always. So be very careful with that thought. Probably часто спрашивают выкрытие для меня. Well, насправді в англійській мові у нас є тільки 2 tenses. Present simple і past simple. Всі такі perfect і continuous, вони є aspects, а не tense. І так, future tense в англійській мові взагалі немає у нас. Це не існує. То так. Yeah, I understand you, Ala, but unfortunately, like in real life, we have to choose between them. Like when we speak, when we write, we need to make them as they are. So yeah, I understand it's not easy, but this is unfortunately what we need to be able. We need to be able to do this, unfortunately. So yeah, I'm sorry. That's how it is. Okay, so a few more minutes, everybody. I'll be pomowczu. I'll give you a few minutes to try and complete these with zero or first. Учні так дивуються, коли їм покаже. Так, це точно. Так, бо це нова інформація, це просто щось нове. But I think it's the best way to learn it at lower levels. It's like saying will is the future simple, not true. Saying we use will to talk about the future, то це правильно, це нормально. І думаю, що це краще. Так казати. Okay, so 2 minutes, everybody. Well, maybe 1 minute, actually. Sorry, 1 minute. We've got 1 more minute. Okay, a few more seconds. За 5 років англійської філології мене навчили, що в англійській мові, як і в українській, 3 часи, Господи Боже. But it's impossible. Will cannot be the future simple. Just for the very simple reason, like, as I said, will is a modal verb. And by definition, modal verbs do not have tense. We use them to show our attitude, our opinion on the language. We have lots of ways of talking about the future, like we have will as a modal, should as a modal, present continuous we can use, present simple we can use modal continuous, we can use modal perfect, but there is not of the future. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. So it's absolutely not true. There's only 2 tenses we have. Present simple, past simple, that's all. All right, so that should be time enough, I think, so let's go through the answers here. So, number 1, we should have she will be disappointed if she doesn't get the job. So, this is a first conditional. This is just a standard first conditional. There's nothing unusual here. So, she will be disappointed if she doesn't get the job. Number 2, if we book this holiday today, after if we use present simple, as we talked about before. Now, in the second part of the sentence, we have in 2 weeks' time. So we want to show that in 2 weeks' time, this action will be in progress at this moment. And so what we need to use here is a modal continuous. And so we should use we will be lying on a warm beach. I'll just put that into the chat actually, just so it's there. So if you want to show that an action is going to be in progress in the future, then usually we use will. It can be any modal in principle, but will is the most typical. So will be lying on a warm beach in 2 weeks' time. Number 3, please call me if you need any help. So here in the first part we have the imperative, наказовый способ, and then if you need, again just present simple after if, as we had before. Number 4, here we have got the key word yet, which I'm sure a lot of you know that with yet we normally use present perfect, and there is no difference here. So if he hasn't read your email yet, hasn't read, you won't hear from him today. So if he hasn't read your email yet, you won't hear from him today. Then on to number 5. If I eat cheese, I break out in a terrible rash. So here we've got something that is generally or always true. This is a 0 conditional, so present simple, present simple. So if I eat cheese, I break out in a terrible rash. And then number 6, again, just the standard first conditional here. If it rains all night, just usual present simple, I won't cut the grass today like I'd planned. Because we've got a situation with a future result, I am not going to cut the grass. So if it rains all night, I won't cut the grass today like I'd planned. So, do we have any questions here? As always, just give a few seconds for everything to come through. Can we say if is raining? Well, it's possible to say, like, just Zahali, we can say if it is raining. Yeah, if it is raining is fine. But we can't say it in this sentence because if we say if it is raining, we mean now, at the moment. And here we've got all night. So here we're referring to a future time reference, and so we need to use present simple here. You could say if it is raining now, then that would be okay. But because of all night, this refers to the future, and so we have to use present simple only here. Chmorpiad said general truth. Well, because if what the person is saying here is that when they eat cheese, they grow a rash. Because if you have a rash, this is obviously an allergic reaction. It's some kind of allergy. And so if you have an allergy, then this means that it will happen to you usually or always. And so that's why it's general. It's something that's like a fact about you. And so for that reason, we should use it. But all night is a long period of time. It doesn't matter how long the period of time is. When we talk about the conditionals, if we are referring to a future time, we have to use present simple. It doesn't matter how long it is. Like I can say, if I live in Ukraine for the next 50 years, for example, we still use present simple. It doesn't matter how long the time is. It's irrelevant. We only use present continuous if it refers to the present moment. It doesn't matter how long the period is. Okay, any other questions here? Okay, all right, well, let's move forward then. We'll go on now to the second conditional. We shall now have a look at. So the second conditional is where we start to get a little bit more difficult. It's not the most complicated, but we're starting to look a bit more difficult structures here. So we use the second conditional to talk about unreal situations, hypothetical, imaginary situations in the present or future. And we usually build this with if plus past simple, then would plus infinitive. So for example, if I found a new job, I would be happier. And yeah, we use this basic structure, if plus past simple, and then would plus infinitive, to talk about situations that are not real in the present or in the future. Now, there are a lot of nuances in the second conditional that we need to know about, to be aware of, and this is one of the first ones. So we have the verb be after if I, if he, if she, if it, excuse me, we can use was or were. So we can say, if I was richer, I would buy a new car. Or we can say, if I were richer, I would buy a new car. It is considered more correct to say, if I were richer. That sounds better. But if you want to say, if I was richer, it's not a mistake, it's okay. But if I were richer sounds better. It sounds more sophisticated. We'll say it like that. But it's only with the verb be where we have this change, because only there we can see the difference between them. If we want to give advice using the second conditional, the basic structure is if I were you, and here we must use were. Was is not correct in this situation. So here we say, for example, if I were you, I would tell her the truth, and that would be the right structure. The same as before with the first conditional, we can also use a couple of other past forms. So after if, we can also use past continuous, and we can also use could as well. So for example, if you were staying for lunch, I would make sandwiches, and if I could help you, I would. So could we use to talk about ability, and we use the past continuous to show for a planned action is the point here. In the result clause, if we want to make the result sound less sure, less certain, we can also use could or might. So we can say, if you asked for a pay rise, you might get one. So I'm not 100% sure, but it's possible that this will happen. Now, if we go to formal English, and this is very formal, so дуже oficjalna angielska mowa, then there are two other structures that we can use. We can use if, were, to plus infinitive. So for example, instead of saying if you asked him, we can say if you were to. Or, as another alternative, we can say were to plus infinitive with no if. So again, instead of saying if you asked him, we can say were you to ask him. Now, both of these structures are very formal. They are very, very high register. And in normal everyday English, you will not hear these because they're very, very unusual. But for formal language, these are great, especially in written English, formal emails and things like that. They're really, really useful. And so, yeah, I can definitely recommend using these for very high register writing. So that's the theory for the second conditional. Does anyone have any questions here? As always, a couple of minutes just to write them in if you have any. I need to get some more water, far too hot today. So as always, I'll just give a few seconds for people to write them in. Looks like we're okay. Doesn't seem to be anything here. So let me give you one task then. Okay, you have to go. Okay, thank you very much for coming. I appreciate your time. Дуже дякую, що ви були з нами. Okay, so let's go to our task then that we have here. So this is a little bit easier than the previous ones that we've had, but I still think it's quite a useful one. So here we have got 10 sentences, and I would like you please to try and choose the correct alternatives to complete them. So a few minutes to have a look. Can you try and choose the correct alternatives? I'm just going to go and get some more water. So I'll give you, like 3-4 minutes for this, and then I'll come back and we'll have a look at the answers. So a couple of minutes to have a look at these 10 sentences. Oj, вибачте, неправильно. Так, і бачиш, у нас є запитання. Чи є різниця у значенні між останнім і передостаннім варіантом на слайді? Ні, немає. They're exactly the same. It's just two different options, two different variants, but the meaning is exactly the same. Різниці немає взагалі. Okay, 2 minutes, everybody. Okay, 1 more minute. Okay, so let's have a look together. So, number 1. I'd work a lot harder if I were you. Here we need to use were because it's this I were you construction. We have to use were here to give advice. Number 2, I wouldn't be telling you this if I... number 2, I wouldn't be telling you this if I thought you were going to repeat it. If plus past simple is the standard in second conditionals. 3, if I were in your position, I'd get legal advice. Will is not correct in second conditionals. We have to use would here, and would is usually shortened to apostrophe D. Then next we have 4, if she could live anywhere she wanted to, she'd live in Brazil. Here we are referring to ability, and so we use could in this situation. Then 5, if I were 10 years younger, I'd go out with him. So again, it's if plus past simple using were here instead of was. Then number 6, if they had enough money, they'd buy this house tomorrow. We use would plus infinitive in the second part of the sentence. 7, if they were to ask me for my opinion. This is obviously a very formal way of saying if they asked for my opinion, but here we have were, so were to plus infinitive. 8, she might win first prize if she entered the competition. This is an unsure, uncertain future, so we can use might here. Then 9, were they to offer you the job? This was the structure that we had earlier. The same as if they offered you, if they were to offer you. Again, very formal, very respectful alternative to the second conditional. And then number 10, if I wasn't working this weekend, I'd spend the time with you. And if you think about like in normal English, we would say, I'm working this weekend. We would use a continuous, and so we need to keep the continuous in the conditional sentence as well. So, does anybody have any questions here? Let's always give a few seconds just for, if there's anything for us to have a look at. Looks to be okay. Not any questions come through. So, okay, we'll move forward to the third conditional then, and then if there are any questions that appear, I'll answer them as we go through the third conditional theory. So we've got two more sets of conditionals to look at. We've got the third conditional and... so I've got a question for number 2, sorry. Let me just go back. Why do we use I wouldn't be telling you this in the number 2? Because here again in the original, like if you think like in normal English, we would use a continuous. We would say, I am telling you this, I am giving you this information. And so because we have got a continuous in the normal English, we need to keep the continuous in the conditional. And the way that we make a conditional, the way that we make a continuous with a modal verb is we use the modal verb, and then we use be, and then we use the verb in the ing form. And this is why we say I wouldn't be telling, because of the original continuous idea. But this is an important point actually, just in general. Whenever you change sentence forms, so if you build a conditional or if you build a passive sentence, for example, then in these situations, if you have a continuous in the original, you should usually keep the continuous in your restructured sentence. And yeah, this is why, because in the original language it would be, I am telling you this, and so we need to keep the continuous here as well. Yeah, that's why we need it. Okay, so let's move forward then. So on to the third conditional. So you'll be very happy to know we've only got 2 more sets of theory to look at. We've got third conditionals, and then we've got mixed conditionals before we finish up. So the third conditional, we use this to talk about unreal, hypothetical situations in the past. And we usually build this conditional using if plus past perfect, then would have plus past participle. Past participle це третя форма, якщо ви знаєте таку систему. So yeah, that's how we build it. So the example we've got here, if I had worked harder, I would have passed my exams. So I didn't work hard, so I didn't pass. It's all about the past. Everything here is about the past. So we use past perfect and then would have plus past participle. In the if part of the sentence, again, like with the second conditional, we can use past perfect continuous. If we have continuous in the original, we keep it in the conditional. And we can also use could have plus past participle. And again, here, could is used to talk about ability. If you want to talk about the ability of doing something. So 2 example sentences here. If we had been travelling in that car, we would have got injured. So if we think like in normal English, we were not travelling in that car. We've got a continuous, and so we keep the continuous here. And then the second one, if we could have got a taxi, we would have visited you. So we were not able, we did not have the ability to get a taxi, and so we didn't visit. As usual, if we want to make the result sound less sure, less certain, like in the second conditional, we can use could or might plus have plus past participle. So for example, if you had asked him for help, he might have said yes. So I'm not 100% sure that he would have said yes, but it's possible that he said yes in the past. And so if you had asked him for help, he might have said yes. And the final structure is about informal English, where we can also use had plus the subject plus the past participle. The meaning is the same as the third conditional, but again, it's just more formal. So instead of saying, if I had known, we can say, had I known. So very simply, you just put had instead of if, and then that will create this formal structure. Again, for everyday communication, it's not very typical, but for formal English, formal writing, it's a very nice phrase that you can use. So, had I known you were a vegetarian, I wouldn't have made fish. So yeah. Don't worry about the like button, it's not important. Najważniejsze сьогодні це гроші, це допомога Охматдиту. Це найважливіше. Це не тому, якщо у вас є можливість, буду дуже вдячний, якщо ви можете долучатися, допомогти. Okay, so let's move forward and let's do some practice with these third conditionals. So here we have got 6 sentences. Very simply, I would like you to try and complete them with the correct form of the verbs in brackets. So once again, 4 minutes. I would like you to try and complete these, and then we'll have a look together in a few moments as usual. So a couple of minutes to have a look. Okay, 2 minutes, everybody. Okay, and 1 more minute. Так, через яку opcję пересилати? Може я не розумію правильно запитання. Ну, якщо QR-код чи щось неправильно працює, ви можете просто скинути гроші просто до Охматдиту, і може це буде найкращий варіант. Якщо QR-код не працює, чи щось пішло не так. Okay, let's check the answers. Let's see what we have here. So, the first sentence, if they hadn't gone out fishing, that's our example, their boat wouldn't have been destroyed. So, as we talked about before, we use would have past participle. So, wouldn't have been destroyed. Number 2, if the plane hadn't seen them, past perfect, hadn't seen, they would probably have died. With words like probably, if we have two auxiliary verbs це допоміжне дієслово, if we have two of them, words like probably, definitely, they go in the middle. So, would probably have died. Це не мені, добре. Гаразд. Okay, number 4. If the couple had arrived home a few minutes earlier, so past perfect, they would have been in the house, would have past participle, when the tree came crashing down, and they might have been killed. Again, modal, have, past participle, usual structure. So one more time. 1, would have been. 2, hadn't seen. 3, would probably have died. 4, had arrived. 5, would have been. And 6, might have been. So, any questions here before we move to our final tasks? As always, just give people a minute to put their questions through. Okay, doesn't look like anything immediate, so we'll move forward to the mixed conditionals. This will be the last thing that we will look at, and yeah, if there are any questions and you've just forgotten about it, you can put them in while I'm talking about mixed conditionals, and I'll answer them after we look at the theory. So the last type of conditional that we need to look at here is with mixed conditionals, and mixed conditionals are interesting, let's say it like that. People often have a lot of difficulty with these, but once you understand like the basic idea of how they work, I think they're quite logical, but you do just need to be quite focused on what time reference you're talking about. So in a mixed conditional, the first and the second part of the sentences refer to different times. The most typical type, the most usual one you will see, is where we have a past action with a present result. So you do something in the past, and the result of this action is in the present, or it is in the future. So the way that we build this is we use if plus past perfect, then would, could, might, plus infinitive. And the reason why we call this a mixed conditional is because the first part, if plus past perfect, that's from the third conditional, what we've just talked about. And would plus infinitive, this is from the second conditional, as we talked about before. So we are mixing together the third and the second conditional. And an example of this would be, as we have here, if I had gone to university, I would have a better job now. So here the situation is I didn't go to university in the past, and so now I don't have a good job. So here we are describing a situation with a past action, and the result of this action is in the present. And so we have to use here a mixed conditional. This is by far the most typical type of mixed conditional. It's the most usual one that you will see. There is one other type of mixed conditional which we also use, as we have here, and sometimes we can have the if clause can refer to the present or future, and the main part of the sentence is about the past. And the way that we build this is if plus past simple, then would, could, might, have, and then the past participle of the verb. And again, here we are mixing the second and the third conditional, because in the first part we have if plus past simple. This is from the second conditional. And then in the second part we have got from the third conditional would have plus past perfect, past participle, would have plus past participle. And an example of this, as we have here, if she were sensible, she wouldn't have quit her job. So what we are saying is she is not sensible. This is a fact. It's still true now. So we use if plus past simple. We're talking about the present. But the result of the fact that she isn't sensible is in the past. And so because of this, we need to use the result clause from the third conditional, and then that's why we have this mix. So she isn't sensible as a fact, and so she quit her job in the past. And so that way we build this sentence. If she were sensible, she wouldn't have quit her job. So as I said, this is probably the most difficult form of conditional. Does anybody have any questions here before we do some practice? I will give you a minute here because, as I said, like the questions seem to take a little bit of time to come through when there are comments and questions. So I'll give you a few seconds just to think about this. It is the most difficult type of conditional, but you'll be pleased to know that after this type of conditional, that's pretty much it. There's basically nothing else that you need to know to build conditionals. So I'll just give a few more seconds to people if there's any questions, and then we'll do our final practice tasks before we finish. Okay, so one is just an exploding head from Alona. Yeah, this is. It's very rare that I say this. Dla mnie ukraińska mowa jest одна з найскладніших мов, які я вивчав, але мені здається, що conditionals це набагато легше в українській мові, ніж в англійській. Бо це просто... Я дуже радий, що я на цій мові, я кажу так. Okay. So it doesn't look like there's any further questions. So let's do one more set of practice tasks. One more set of practice tasks, and then we will finish up. So here we have got... Zaraz. Wait. Yeah, okay, this is what I want you to do. Yeah, so here we've got 10 sentences. This is our last task we are going to do. 10 sentences. I would like you to try and complete the sentences with the correct verb form. So, again, as always, 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll have a look. Again, if you do have any other questions, anything off topic, anything else you want to ask, now is the time. While people are working, you can put them in. I'll be happy to discuss them while people are answering these questions. 2 minutes, everybody. Так, тут є запитання. Чи читаєте українську літературу? Що найбільше вразило або сподобалось? Чесно кажучи, я не дуже часто читаю українську літературу, просто в мене немає часу, коротше. Та останнє, що було останнє, що я читав? Напевно, це було «Танго смерти». Це була остання книга, яку я читав. Але взагалі мене просто немає часу саме зараз читати взагалі. І чесно кажучи, читати в українській мові, це, для мене це дуже складно. Читати будь-якій іноземній мові, це реально дуже, дуже складне завдання. Я не знаю, бо коли є... звичайно, в українській мові є дуже багато, класики, типу Енеїда, наприклад, чи, до речі, Енеїда це хороший приклад, бо я це читав, може пару років тому, але це реально було так складно все зрозуміти, все. Я просто не шарив, чесно кажучи. Я не розумів, як це. It was very, very difficult for me to read. Every few words I had to stop, check a dictionary just to have a look. Yeah, Tango Smeti Vinichuk, yeah, that's right. It's his book. I have a few other books that I need to read, like I have some books from Jardin somewhere in my bookshelf that I need to read. And I have a few historical, factual books as well that I want to read about the history of Ukraine too. But I think when you read in any foreign language, it's very, very difficult. And especially, if we talk about Eneida, for example, the language that is used in this book is very different from the Ukrainian that people use nowadays, at least from my perspective as a foreigner. So when we talk of the classic Ukrainian authors, when we talk about Kotlяревський, Ukrainka, Shevchenko, all of these, when you read them, it's very difficult sometimes to fully understand the ideas. It's not easy. Still a good idea to read, but it's not the easiest thing for me to get right. So yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at these answers and then we'll finish up because it's been nearly 2 hours. I've kept you for too long, I think. So yeah. So number one, if she hadn't died so young, she would be a famous musician now. Number two, if you didn't work so hard all the time, you wouldn't have been ill last year. 3, if he hadn't wasted so much money in his youth, he could be a wealthy man now. If I were a more sensitive person, I wouldn't have upset her in the way that I did. 5, if they really wanted to emigrate, they would have moved to another country by now. 6, if he had worked harder last month, he wouldn't be so busy now. 7, I wouldn't be doing this job today if I had known how boring it would be. 8, if the train hadn't been delayed, we would be there now. 9, if the passenger hadn't forgotten her passport, she would be boarding the plane now. And number 10, if you had followed the diet your doctor gave you, you might not be ill now. Okay, so do we have any questions here? And while, if anybody is thinking of any questions, I can give, just talking about difficult books in Ukrainian, if you want a difficult book to read in English, or what I believe is probably the most difficult book in the English language, is a book called Finnegan's Wake, which was written by James Joyce, I think in 1939. And this is generally believed to be one of the most difficult books in the English language. It's a very experimental book. James Joyce was an Irish writer. He was from the Republic of Ireland, but he wrote a lot in English. Ulysses was another famous book of his. But Finnegan's Wake is, even for native speakers, it's almost impossible to understand. It's a very, very difficult book. So if you want a challenge, then I can definitely recommend this as well. And Alona, don't worry about getting 3 out of 10. I mean, for mixed conditionals, these are very, very hard to get right. They're the rarest type of conditionals, but they're also the most difficult ones. So it's okay. Don't worry too much. It's not the end of the world. Okay, right. So we've been here for 2 hours, so I think we can probably finish there for now. So thank you all very much for your participation. Дуже вам дякую за участь. Дуже вдячний, що ви були з мною. І сподіваюся, що це було для вас корисним, що ви вивчали щось нове. І якщо у вас є можливість, будь ласка, подумайте про можливість жертвування Охматдиту. Це найважливіше сьогодні. Тому так, я просто хочу ще раз сказати, щиро вам дякую. Я бажаю вам приємного вечора. Всім бережіть себе і слава